Okay guys, it's time to look at your Yucky You's worksheet. So we're going to get this worksheet out, and you need to be able to write on this right now. So have a pen or a pencil and or a highlighter out right now, and we'll have the sub pause this while you guys make sure you have all that out. Okay, so this worksheet on here is going to look like a very long one, but for you, I think the first side ends here, okay? So we're going to be talking about two things today in terms of how we get rid of these Yucky You's. And what these Yucky You's are, when you're writing, sometimes we write meaning people in general, or that something generally happens. Instead, we say you with it, which is really kind of a second person kind of voice. And we don't want to do that at all. So we're going to look at two different ways to get rid of them. First of all, rephrasing, and second of all, replacement, okay? So we have two different things going on here, the rephrasing and the replacement, that we're going to be looking at today to get rid of Yucky You's. Okay, so let's just look at the first part of this page. We're going to be looking at just the rephrasing chunk up front, okay? So let's go through these directions. Rephrasing says, you can follow along with my pointer, using a whole new phrase or set of words, not just taking out the you and replacing it with another word, okay? Okay, so if you look at example number 1, you can follow along with my pointer as I read this. You wouldn't really like this book if you don't like fantasy books. Now sometimes when we're writing that, it means people in general. The kind of person who likes fantasy books would be the kind of person that likes this book. So if this person doesn't like fantasy books, this person wouldn't like this book. So what I'm saying is, with this rephrasing, we have to find a whole new phrase or set of words. We can't just take out the you. We can't just take out the you and be done with it. If we did, the only way to do that would be to put in somebody's name specifically and write that in. But if you're saying, in general, for people, the kind of person who would be the kind of person who, you can't just say one person's name. You have to figure out a new way to say this. So let's look at this. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. So a way to correct this first example, you wouldn't really like this book if you don't like fantasy books, would be to say, this book was written for fantasy lovers. It wouldn't be enjoyable to those who aren't. We have to find a whole new way to say this. We can't just cross off the you's, okay? So that's what I'm talking about when I say that we are rephrasing something, okay? This rephrasing right here is a whole new way of saying it, okay? So another way to rephrase that would be to say, only those readers, and we're looking at this next example down here, to say, only those readers who especially enjoy reading fantasy would enjoy this novel. Otherwise, it might seem far-fetched to some readers, which is the same exact point as we were trying to say up here in this sentence. We were basically trying to say these things, but we had to do it by rephrasing and not just deleting that word. We've got to make a rephrase with a whole new set of words. And that's what these are. These are whole new sets of words. So let's look at the second example. Okay, so now we're looking at the second example under rephrasing. So I'm going to scroll this so you can basically just look at example number 2. Okay, so we're on example number 2 now. And we're going to look at another way to rephrase again. So basically we've got something that has you in it. We've got to get the you out, and we don't want to just take this and replace it with a word. We want to totally rephrase this. So let's figure out what it says first. Follow along with me as I read. Example 2. The spaghetti is so good, it makes you want to scarf it down as fast as you can. What they're saying is that it's really hard for a person to eat this slowly because it's so delicious. And that basically says the same idea. It says the spaghetti is so good that someone wants to scarf it down as fast as that person can. Now, I do want to briefly talk about why you would say, where is it? His or her because it's really not fair to say their mouth, because when we say a person, that's one person. And if we say they or their, that's more than one person. That's a plural. So you need to say his or her, meaning a single person, because in English there's not a single way to say a neutral gender, unless we, of course, say it, and we don't call people its. So you say his or her mouth, not their mouth. And remember, we're still talking about rephrasing, which means we totally have to change the words and phrase. We cannot just substitute in something else for the you. Okay, so go ahead and follow along with me as we look at number 3. This book has a lot of detail that really makes you think. You won't be able to put it down. What we're saying about this is the book is so good that someone who's reading it just wants to read it all the time. So we have to do that without just taking out you, because there really only is one other way to do that, is by putting in a person's name. And we're not talking about a person right now. Okay, so let's look at our final example here. Follow along as I talk about example 3. This book has a lot of detail that really makes you think. Could be turned into, this novel is thought-provoking and keeps the reader involved and constantly reading, which is a really fancy way to say this, and probably sounds even better than it was originally written. Another way would be, with such an interesting plot and fantastic detail, this novel is impossible to put down, which is exactly what we're talking about doing, or not doing here, not being able to put it down. Okay, so those were 3 ways that we can rephrase, okay? That's actually the hard one. The simple one is sometimes to just replace, and that's what we're going to talk about second. Okay, so we've already talked about this first half up here, okay, which we have said is about rephrasing. So we're going to come down here and look at the second half, which is the replacement, which is actually the easy one. So this is about to get much easier, in my opinion, for you in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to move this up, and you're just going to look down at the bottom of your page, because now we're talking about the second half, which is about replacement. Okay, so let me blow this up while you read along with me and follow along. Replacement, the second way we're going to get rid of these yucky yous. It says, other ways to change you in a sentence are to insert words in place of you. It is always better to rephrase, which is in fact the thing that we just got done doing above, rephrasing. But sometimes it might be overly awkward to do so. So sometimes rephrasing isn't always that easy. In those cases, you can try replacement. So you're going to have to forgive my little A's here that you see. I think that's something when I transferred it to this program. So let's look at the first part where it says one. Okay, you can use the word one. And when I say that, I mean one person or a person in general. Okay, which sounds a little bit formal to you guys sometimes, but that's a good way to start practicing using it, is little by little, because it's actually not as formal as you might think it is, and more common in everyday writing as you get older. So what we would do is we would take this word one right here and look at the original sentence, which says, you would think that people would know better. And what we mean is, instead, one would think that people would know better. Which means in general, that a person would think that people in general would know better. So the way you would just do that is replace you with one and say, instead, one would think that people would know better. Another good word you could use is people. So let's talk about people in a second here. So in this instance, we're going to take the word people and put it in the sentence. The original sentence says, it really makes you think. Instead of saying it really makes you think, we're going to get rid of that you, and we're going to say it really makes people think. And that means people in general. It doesn't have to be a specific person. Okay, so the last one we're talking about here is anyone or readers or any group of people. So on this example, it says anyone or readers or any group of people. The example, if you would follow my pointer, says, if you don't like chicken, you won't like McNuggets from McDonald's. So when they say you, what's the group of people? Obviously, in this instance, it's not readers. We're not talking about readers here. We're talking about people who are eating chicken McNuggets, okay? So the group we could say would be as simple as saying McDonald's customers. So you could say McDonald's customers who don't like chicken won't like McNuggets. So if we move down to this next example, it says, when you go to the movie theater, you should buy popcorn. Again, we can't talk about, as it's set up here, readers, but we could find another group. We could say, for instance, as it shows here, moviegoers or families or patrons or movie watchers. Any of those would be okay. So we could say, for example, when moviegoers go to the movie theater, they should buy popcorn, because moviegoers is actually plural, so you can use that there as in a plural. Or you could say, when families go to the movie theater, they should buy popcorn. You could use any of those, but you have to find a group of people. Okay, so we have gone over two things. First, we've gone over rephrasing, which is that, and the second thing that we've gone over is replacement, which is that. So we're done with this first half of the page. Now we need to flip it over. So you're going to go ahead and flip this page over, and I'm going to scroll up to what it looks like for you on the back. Okay, yours actually has all 10 that you're seeing here, side by side, but I'm only going to start from the beginning, and then you can continue on your own. Okay, so you have 10 of these here. Here are the rules, that 5 of them must use the rephrasing technique, and 5 of them must use the replacement technique. So you have to do 5 of one kind and 5 of the other kind that we practiced already. And what you have to be careful of is that you don't just take out the yous, but you take out all forms of the word you. So your or your. Okay? The other thing that you have to be super careful about is, if we're looking at getting those yous out, getting the yucky yous out, something else that includes you are these words. If you say we, that means you and me. So that doesn't count. We can't use we either. If we say our, that means your stuff and my stuff. So we can't use our either. If you say us, that means you and me and some other people maybe. Okay? So us doesn't work, our doesn't work, and we doesn't work. So when we say take out all forms of the word you, that means your, as well as we, our, us. You can't replace a you with something that's meaning of the same thing. So let's look at number 1. It says, it makes you want to read this book because it makes you wonder what's going to happen next. Right now, what I'd like you to do is do some practice and figure out a way that you are going to change that, okay? And at the bottom, I want you to notice that it asks you for your technique used, and it even says circle one. So you're going to figure out, are you rephrasing, like we talked about in the first part? Are you replacing, like we talked about in the second part? So right now, the sub is going to pause this video. You are going to create and tell us whether you did rephrase or replace. Okay, now that you have some time to write these things, what the sub is going to do is call on some people, and you will have a chance to say how you reworded this, and we'll write it up, and then we will circle either the phrasing or the replacement, depending on what you did. So I'll have the sub do maybe 2 to 3, well, that's not a very good 3, but 2 to 3 students' work, or student examples, on the board, and then you guys will go ahead and start this on your own and go through the rest of this worksheet all the way down to 10. And you should be able to do this today in class. You shouldn't need time to take this home. The only exception to that would be is if the sub specifically tells you after you're working on this, because she's there and I am not, that there is more time needed and she can make that judgment call. If she does not, it should be due today in class, unless she otherwise states, or he otherwise states. Happy writing, guys. Be good for the sub and get your work done.